Got it. Okay.
Good work.
She's a remote control.
Huh?
I said she needs a remote control.
I thought you said, I'm like, I kinda am like her
Like
remote
remote
control,
control.
huh?
That's what I was when I was a kid. My dad's like, hey, turn channel.
I used to
Sure,
stand
Dad.
at the channel.
Sure, Dad. I'll
I
turn the
stood
channel.
there
Yep.
between MASH and, whatever else was it?
All in the family.
Yes.
Monday nights. Monday Night Football.
All right, Kathy, ready? I'd
Ready.
like to call this development committee meeting to order at 4 p.m. Would you take a roll real quick?
Lee,
Here.
Walther,
Here.
Carter,
Here.
I will stand for pledge. Andy, you want to get it?
Sure. Ready? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All righty. I like the sign first. That's cool. The sign.
I would just like to quickly thank Mr. Hickett and whoever his assistant was in coming up with to
Did you
help
say
get
Chris?
us back in.
Chris was your Mr.
Chris.
Mr. Schrock was the utility.
Utility
Gotcha.
desk engineer on this project.
Desk engineer. He is indeed. And Kathy.
Okay.
All right, Scott, you want to give us a quick update on Scenic View?
So Scenic View, they have their revisions over to us. Originally, they just said there was this concern, we revised it. So then I was trying to go through and find it, and I said, you know what? You know where it was revised, so say this is revised, so it's, you know, page 3 in the text, you know, everywhere, so I can go through and check. So they got that back to me, so we're going through and reviewing it. That's pretty much where we are. I told them that I want to make sure that moving forward that I's are dotted, T's are crossed, that we don't have some of the errors that we've seen before, such as the 5-inch caliper, some of those things, to make sure that this is complete when it does potentially come off the table before council and an action is taken. So it's in the process.
All right.
Scott, if it helps at all, I'll look through it again if you want me to. If not, I'll leave it alone, but I'll be glad to look at it if you want me to.
I appreciate that. Once I kind of get my review done, we'll see how that goes, and then I may take you up on that offer pending how complete their revisions are.
Okay. Yeah, the big ones were like the 99 years versus 30 years. And
Just
the
consistency,
big,
I agree.
big ticket items are the ones that, you know, we want to make sure they get right.
I agree.
Mel, you have anything on that? I don't either. Randy, you good?
Uh-huh.
Keep on moving?
Fine.
So we'll talk about that one hopefully next development committee meeting.
Hopefully.
All right. Thanks for your work on that. I know it's been daunting. So hopefully we can get that wrapped up here. All right, we'll move on to the comprehensive plan. Why don't we, let's just start with chapter 1. I know that just to recap, and I don't know if you, I know you weren't here last time, Mel, but I don't know if you listened to the minutes or not, Andy, anybody. I think we were pretty much done with 1. We just wanted to review 1, the changes to 1, and then kind of nail it down. Is that where is that how I remember it right?
I think we had, we had a big discussion about,
Yeah.
you know, is this a guide? Is it a directive? Is it, you know, this, that, and the other? And we decided that this was a guide. And that's what kind of the comments were geared towards and revised to be geared towards. And I think the other part was just making sure that it became a TASCLA plan. You know, I think that was our 2 big pieces to the puzzle that we wanted to try to make sure happen.
Okay, well, just as a refresher, let's just go down through them, the changes, and make sure they're what we all want. And I think, I can't remember, it might be in 2. I know one thing, I think I told you this, Mel, when I talked to you. We took the path, or it wasn't even a path,
Just a picture of it.
yeah, but it was
Picture of
a,
arrows.
It wasn't a bike
arrows.
path, but it was a
Greenway.
greenway.
Yeah, the greenway arrows could give the impression of that being a path, therefore, I know we jumped ahead, but that was requested to be removed, so I have that,
Yeah, that's
I have a note in here in my plan.
Cause it had a little color box in the legend and we
Had the
just took it
blue-
out.
Yeah, the
So-
blue arrows. So as we go through this, my goal would be to, we go through the comments and we say yes, no, or tweak this, just so I can keep a log. So that way, when I go back to OHM and say, this is what development committee would like to see, it's very, I can say, page 6, paragraph 2, please change this. So I can make it very specific and then expedite things on their end so we get it back quicker.
I like that, Scott, and I would, also like, I don't know if that's something that we can kind of keep a running, document of, that maybe after a meeting and we make those, recommendations, you could kind of put that on the document and send it out to us,
Mhm.
so we can look at it before the next meeting, and say, hey, I think we talked about this or didn't. But that'll kind of keep us from, one, when we're in a further chapter, if it conflicts with something we've done, but it's right in front of us, so we can kind of see that'd be helpful for me at least.
We'll do.
Yep. Our quarterback over there is doing Tom Brady, is that what you called yourself?
Too. He's a Tampa now.
I know, it's getting old, I'll stop you.
Well, you mentioned quarterback, so I was like, here's one everybody knows.
I thought you called yourself Tom Brady the first meeting, but.
Because I said,
exactly,
I'll be Tom Brady, joking around, but
So you're
the joke has
keeping,
yet to die.
you're keeping a running tab, like Mel said,
That's-
of all this stuff.
That's my plan, that after a meeting, I go through, these are the changes we propose, and then before I send it out to development committee, it'll be page 6, paragraph 2, change X to Y. So that way, it's a very clear, concise, that we're all on the same page.
And I don't feel like it has to be anything elaborate, Scott, so on my part, I don't want you to feel like you have to it could literally be bullets. Just, I don't want you to put a bunch of time into something that, you have other things to do as well.
I
But
would
it would
say-
just, the running list with just bullets would be fantastic.
And I appreciate that, but my thought is when I eventually take it to OHM,
You have a complete document?
well, then it'll be, their changes, it'll be a very easy task for them, which in the end ultimately saves us money.
Exactly what I was gonna say, John. If he's gonna create that way for OHM,
Yeah,
that way he could just send you guys whatever he's keeping track of anyway. It should help.
So, on section 1 here, on our sheet, you wanna just run down through those, Scotty, just highlight those and, we can talk about it, make sure we're all good with it, and then we can.
so on Mr. Walters' comments, he has table of contents. A, need to identify subchapters in chapters 2, 4, 5, and 6 with lettering for specific reference.
Can I back up
Wait a
just a
minute,
second? 'Cause
what sheet are we on? I'm on
You're
this.
you're
I'm
on-
looking
He
at
wants
this
you to
one.
go through yours.
Oh,
Yeah, I was just gonna
but
say.
mine jumps into section 1 where Mr. Walter does discuss the table of contents.
What am I looking at? I'm looking at the actual comp plan. Is that not?
Oh,
what
I was looking at this sheet that Scott put out there.
Oh,
There's Mr. Walter's comments?
That's what you're looking
Does
at?
everybody have a copy or?
yeah,
You should, yeah.
I do, I just,
Do we, okay, well, let me back up a minute then. Do we want, cause I know we went
oh, yeah,
over
there it is.
these quite a bit last week. Do we,
These have since been revised since last meeting.
oh,
They were revised down from, remember, we had talked about making them more guide-oriented rather than really looking at this as a shall or directive-type comments. So they are now guide-oriented.
okay. I had not seen those yet. Is it the bold? Are those the changes, the bold? Like on page 1, guide and visions in bold?
Well, I can't swear that. I took a bunch of stuff out, basically. I'll just leave it that way.
I'd hate to seen it before.
Probably. Yeah, it was like it was probably 7 pages, so, but it was definitely revised. Just, if I step back just a second, under the acknowledgements, Scott, I didn't look at this, but after looking at the next couple chapters, I went back and looked at this. They are, the elected officials and city staff should all be updated.
Got it.
Got that? Perfect. Great.
So do we wanna work off, let's, so we're all on the same page, do we wanna work off this, or do we wanna work off this, as we're going through one?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Scotty, take us through it, how about that?
We'll do, so, table of contents. A, need to identify subchapters in chapters 2, 4, 5, and 6 with lettering for specific reference. So if you look under chapter 2, there's multiple different sections, so it would be 2A is public engagement, 2B, that's I'm assuming, I don't wanna,
That's what I was talking about. So you can find a page, if you wanna look stuff up, this was very, unidentified, it's just not very descriptive of where you can find some. If you wanted to find out public engagement, you'd wonder what page that was on, and it started at 40 and then went back to 20 and then 22 and so forth, so it was chronological order and subsections would be helpful.
No, that is just, you know, the type A personality in me, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Me too. So, okay.
Yeah, under one for A, B, and C, I don't think all three of those things are pretty basic, I would say.
Well, in one, let me just say, in 1C, I threw it out there as, I'm thinking this as a story, so I think of it as, but I do agree, Scott and I had a little discussion about this, nobody's gonna read this from first chapter to last chapter,
Right.
quite frankly. They're gonna look stuff up and that's what they're gonna use it for. So, you can disregard, 1 part C, where I say, maybe you change the 2
Okay.
sections because it would make more sense that way, but. that's
I'm
okay.
good with either way. I mean, I guess I would lean
Save the
towards
money, let's just save the money.
table of contents being first, because I know if I'm looking, that's normally where I go.
But I always, a typical document has like an introduction and then a table of contents.
Yeah,
It's how something is generally organized,
I would agree with you.
any sort of document. So if you were to pull up just about any policy manual or anything, there's like a brief introduction that nobody reads, and then they skip right to the table of contents.
Timmy, anything on one you got?
Nope.
Okay.
so we want introduction prior to the table of contents?
Leave the table first, is what I'm hearing.
Personally, Mel's absolutely right that there's usually an introduction first, then you go through.
Okay,
But,
I'm with you.
but I don't,
I'm
as
just
far as
thinking
saving
of
money.
like business, like typical business writing, and when you get any sort of a manual or guide or book or whatever, it generally has an introduction,
Absolutely.
then a table of contents.
We're on the same page.
Okay,
You good with that?
so an
So-
introduction, then a table of contents is how the order we're going.
Okay. So it's not switching chapter 1 and 2. So C, so now it's table of contents, no, introduction, table of contents, then we hit. So then we renumber plan foundations is 1, community identity is 2, so on and so forth.
Yes,
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so we'll see. Alright, then on to number 2, chapter 1, pages 6 through 15. Page 6, need to have more clarity that this is a guide or vision and not a zoning document. Shrink the first paragraph and simplify it. I, 2 key statements on this page that must be considered. Quote, the comprehensive plan is a document by which all future policy and budgetary decisions should be evaluated. And 2, there are key elements that will be integral for guiding policies, practices, and investments in the future. from mine, for number 1, it says should, not shall, so I'm fine with that. I mean, typically in zoning documents, if it says shall, you must, should is a recommendation. So I'm good with leaving number 1 as is, but I'll leave that to you.
So what we're looking at is should versus shall in point 1 here.
Right, because if the point is for it to be a guide, it doesn't say the comprehensive plan is a document which all future policy and budgetary decisions shall be evaluated means. If it's not recommended in here, you know, it's like you base the decisions on this. Where if you have should, it's saying you should consider this. Doesn't say you have to, but when you make, you know, a rezoning, for example, you should consider what's in here. If we do infrastructure, we should take a look at the plan when, you know, vetting those decisions, versus shall says you have to do it, no ifs, ands, and buts.
Okay, can I play devil's advocate?
Mhm.
Just for somebody who's not a zoning person or whatever, just in lay terms, if I were to read something and it said should, that sounds kind of passive to me. More like, I can get them to do what I want. Should kind of implies that we're lightly, you know what I mean? Like, if we're putting all this work into it, we wanna give a strong guide, but we wanna say, I feel like if we still say shall, that doesn't hold us to anything. That anything that's presented, it shall, we're gonna refer to this, but then there's always the, you know, the process of doing something different. You know what I mean? Am I not making any sense?
No, I do. My thought is that if we're focusing on this as a guide,
Mm-hmm.
that should lends itself more to it being a guide than the term or the word shall.
Okay.
That's my thought, that it does indicate and backs up the aspect that this is a guide.
In the past, when I've written legislation, I've used shall and should interchangeably. Must is the one.
Must is the one I'm not, yeah, cause I don't know, I feel should is a little like, and I
So,
feel like
but
this is-
either one, I think that's style,
Yeah, but
I
I-
agree with what Scott said there,
Yep.
that should
I'm-
was.
In the legal world, shall means you will. I mean, shall means you are going to do that. That's the purpose, that you shall do it. Or, as you would say, must.
So are you guys at odds with that?
I don't think so.
Right.
I think we're exactly the same. To make this a guide, it should be, well,
It should be.
it should say should.
Should.
It should
Agreed.
give good ideas, it should give things that the zoning person looks at and says, you know, this thing said this, but it hasn't worked out, so we don't have to do it, because it didn't work out. But if it had good ideas that did work out, you can say, well, it says you should look at this, and that's a good, and it worked.
And from a zoning standpoint, you know, you have the code and everything, it's always black and white, but projects are never black and white. That you always have to leave room to be flexible, and I think we say this is a guide, we should be doing this, but if a project comes up that it's like, well, it says we have to do this, but this doesn't fit in that box, that gives you that flexibility.
Okay.
The other side of it too is that some places, if you have a comprehensive or a strategic plan,
Mhm.
they use that to base their decisions for infrastructure. Well, we're gonna run this water line up here because that's gonna be our new, whatever, you know, or city center, whatever. If you say shall, then you're really dictating that's what it's gonna be, and rather than giving yourself enough room to not do it that way.
I'm fine with it. Yeah.
So do we want to shrink the first paragraph, or are we fine with?
Here's just so I can say it in overarching.
Yeah.
A lot of this is very verbose. They put in a lot of language in here that really doesn't do anything for you. I'm just saying, if we can make this more, the more language you put in there that doesn't help the guide, the more confusing it can be, and the more erroneous it can be. It can be utilized incorrectly to our desires or our planning at this point. You know, again, this is about Tommy's point, you know, if it's gonna cost a lot of money for them to go through and edit this, then a few extra sentences isn't gonna make a big deal.
Right.
But at the same time, I would just keep it in mind that that's kind of one of the pieces in this whole thing. They have a few things in here where they say the same thing every time at the beginning of a certain paragraph. They say it over and over and over and over again in every chapter, and it makes no sense. So,
I mean, because if I'm gonna keep this law,
I
I'm
will.
gonna need some specific
I'll
examples.
give you, when we get to it, I'll show you. It's under the analysis side, under the analysis paragraph.
Okay, so what is a comprehensive plan or paragraphs? I mean, from my perspective, it makes sense. So if we want to change it, that's fine, but I need to know what we want to change it to, or what needs to be struck.
Gotta go back and read it again. I can take it or leave it. It doesn't, that is not something to me that, I can leave it the way it is, or if somebody has a suggestion, I don't have any suggestions to add to it.
That's fine, just, leave that one.
If you have one, Andy, throw it out there.
No, it's okay, I mean, it's better not, because they'll have to reformat, and it just, I understand the money part of it.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so 2A, it says guide and vision, we're good that it adequately conveys that it is a guide.
Do we, I mean, there's things in here where it says, you know, what, by which all future policy and budgetary discretion should be looked at. Should be looked at. Now, so, I'm okay with that, as long as we keep in there that guide viewpoint to it, that's great. That's what I think our goal is here.
Okay, so 2A, we're good. The statements, number 1, we're good with keeping that in there, the comprehensive plan. All right, and then the second statement, there are key elements that will be integral for guiding policies, practices, and investments in the future. This, is this over the next 10 to 20 years?
Yep.
And that's typically, the shelf life of a comprehensive plan is about 10. That's kind of why we're in the process again, because ours was, current one was 06. So 10 to 20, 20 is pretty long, but 10, 15, probably get out of that. So is that okay to leave that statement in the plan as is?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have no problem with it.
All right. So on to 2A2, because under future land use map and character type states, this map and plan implied should directly inform, update, and revisions to the zoning code.
Right.
What page? It
I'm
would
still
help me
on,
to know
still
what-
on 6.
Is that one on, that's still on 6?
So,
2A2?
so if we go second bullet point on page 6.
Okay.
Yeah, second paragraph. So this is the reference to a future use map that says, here's how everything is going to be. And the question is, in this statement is, we're making a reference to, it says, this map should directly inform updates and revisions to the zoning code.
Okay.
So, and I think that is a step that we have to be ready to take. If that is if this is adopted, are we ready to take that step to update the zoning code to these, you know, what's on the map? Essentially these, versus like our R20. Are we ready to move that to whatever, medium density is what it's called in the comp plan?
I think that's the idea, right? I mean, so it's all consistent?
We have no choice but to do that. So conservation rural, conservation suburban.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's
We-
the,
the planning and zoning department fully understands we have to do that. So this gets adopted out of the gate, we have to start updating the code, because we can't say, well, this is conservation rural, okay, I'd like to develop.
Right.
I don't know how to do it, so we
I
have
feel like
to,
it's kind of a given, that's,
yeah, we have to.
Yeah, I thought we were, that's the
Okay.
problem.
And if I didn't, you wouldn't be very happy with me.
No,
Scott, it's not on this list, but then, you know, looking there on 6, the next one's the Greenway Network. That's getting struck, right?
We still have the greenways in the sense that it shows areas of, you know, tree stands or wetlands or, you know, sensitive environmental features. The arrows are what is being removed because that would imply that we're installing a path. So this says that it creates general guideline for future greenway development in the city, preserving open spaces and protecting natural features. So, you know, if property A were to develop on the north, big tree stand, so we'd say, keep that. And then the next property, B, the south end has a big tree stand, so then we like the puzzle, we put the green areas together, so it's not disjointed, but you would have green areas consistent. So it's not saying, you know, we're gonna put a path in here now, it's just, as things develop, make sure that we respect the green areas and try and keep them together instead of.
But taking it's not specific, it's to those arrows, with those arrows being gone.
Arrows gone, I think it clears up any
Right, okay.
perception that it would be paths.
So while we're talking about that, I'm lost now.
Right here, well, were you at the, I can't remember.
What was the last meeting?
Bullet point 3 on page 6.
yeah, we have the Greenway Network, it's still a thing, we're just taking out the very offensive arrows.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fair enough. I just wanted to make
Just
sure.
removing them from a picture, yes? That's what I was.
That's exactly what I thought
Yeah.
was happening, okay, so, but that's not captured in any of these comments, we just jumped onto a section that had no comments, right?
That's correct.
Okay, that's
So,
why I was lost, I'm looking back and forth in these comments, and I was.
I just
looking-
wanted to make sure that that's what we were doing, so I'm good with that.
okay, so 2A2, we're good with leaving as is?
Yep.
Okay. All right, 2A3, overall, this chapter switches between guide and use without clarity, giving selective teach the plan's contents and direction. This is specifically noticed on page 8 under how to use the plan. Oh, excuse me. So D, and then it references DI below.
Andy, does your DII below actually?
That was an old one.
Okay.
I was
Okay.
looking for that too, because the D2 or D2I is gone, so that's out there,
Page 8 under how to use the plan.
left over. Yeah, so basically on this page, on the left side of the page, it goes back and forth about, you know, it's a guide, and then it says, will be used to do this. Okay, I'm just trying to make this be very consistent as far as this is a guide. You know, again, the comprehensive plan guides the city's staff and so forth. When you're putting in a zoning, it says all these different items in here. I wanted to just, this one is a leftover from probably it's a revised comment from before, and it's just basically saying, make it consistent that it's a guiding principle on how to use this. This is for guidance, but it's not necessarily, there's gonna be another piece that comes up this where we have had some situations where we've had a case-by-case analysis or evaluation of a development.
Yeah, pretty much.
We have.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
I was
pretty much
trying to
all of
make this, I was trying to make this so that it could still have that.
Mm-hmm,
It's not, this is not the Bible.
right.
This is a guide, and if you have a case-by-case analysis, or you have something strange like, what is that, Sage comes, or not Sage, Scenic View Estates comes up, you can do something different.
Mm-hmm, I agree.
That's all. That's what I was trying to say there.
So it says will guide, are we okay with leaving it says will guide, should it say should guide?
Just say, I said, the comprehensive plan guides the city staff and officials during this. I
Okay,
think
I like that.
it can be simple,
comprehensive plan guides.
yeah, or provides guidance, whichever way you wanna put it.
So also guides.
Yep.
2B, page 8, planning in Pataskala section should include mention of the historic rural versus village urban merger. This remains an important aspect of our community history and sets us apart from most other communities. Many of our community members are not aware of this step that set the course for Pataskala and retained its rural character, a distinction that is hard fought today. So after essentially the first sentence,
Yeah.
something that says, hey.
I think it gives somebody 20 years from now, when we aren't here being involved, maybe Tim will be, but.
Wait, do you know something I don't?
Yeah. He, gives somebody that reference to it, because it's an important piece to it.
Where am I going?
Well, 20 years, I mean, hopefully you get to retire sometime.
Okay, I think just a simple statement that it created a merger of urban and rural, and elaborate on that. Okay.
Yep.
I'll write something up, and when I send out the summary, I'll include like, here's where it's going.
If you don't mind, Scott, you and I can work on that together.
Sure.
Stop over and we'll see if we can craft, we're looking at 3 or 4 sentences.
There's probably a couple of those in here that are like that are it's just an opportune time to really inform. Don't lose it. If we put it in here, people will understand it a little bit more.
I agree, and I think it probably a sentence or two, right?
Yep.
I think would capture that.
So I'll pledge to work with Scott on those if we identify them moving forward, as long as everybody is okay with them.
I think 1 or 2 sentences is probably enough. I don't wanna bog down, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
All right, so on to 2C, page 8. How will this document conform to the last few zonings and the statements by the zoning board members and city staff that they were evaluated on a case-by-case basis, various council meeting statements? Let's discuss C.
Yeah.
Under how to use a plan, there is not a clarification for flexibility that would support the action of case-by-case basis. Inference that this is the city's policy or innate mandate is not an acceptable reason if this plan is adopted as the foundation upon which we build Pataskala.
didn't we just address that with guides instead of?
Yeah, I think that it's, well, guide would say that here's a guide for this, but what I'm suggesting here is there may be another piece that under this, how to use this plan, that there's an explanation that there are unusual situations that come up, unusual uses that come up that may not be addressed by this plan. Those should be a case by, maybe not using the word case by case basis, but those should be evaluated in the spirit of the comprehensive plan, so say. It's an issue about, we're not gonna catch every nuance and every way of development within this plan, we can't. So there really isn't any discussion in here about what happens if you find something, if you find a square peg that doesn't fit in the round hole, or in the round hole.
So you're just saying, add a bullet point
Yeah.
that says.
So it just says, gives you the ability to, this is a guide, and when this guide, please use it as a spirit, use it in the spirit of development when it doesn't fit exactly. Make sense?
Or, I guess, yeah, or just,
So what if we have the
there's always
comprehensive,
extenuating circumstances that may be necessary for a case-by-case review.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that's.
well, we could add something that says flexible. I mean, coming from someone in the planning department, it would be, we would use it as that. I guess from our standpoint, it's implied that we would say,
That's what I was, yeah.
you know, that I'm thinking if scenic view were to come and it says, well, this should be high density, but here's what they're proposing, I think we would say, well,
What do you think about a
And
sentence?
the guide
that-
says, and the plan says guide.
What do you think about a sentence that says something like, from time to time, unusual cases will arise, and use of flexible solutions is encouraged?
Hmm.
nice.
Yep.
How about that
That
bullet
would
point?
be, that's good. I like that. And I think that's all I was trying to say is let's have a catch-all.
Fine with that. Alright. Mel, good with that? Okay.
Alright, got that. Page 11, under plan framework. A plan without an implementation strategy is naturally limited in its effectiveness.
Yeah. This is one of,
Page 11.
this is an example of a sentence that you find in this document throughout this whole document, not this exact sentence, but sentences like that. Are they necessary, first of all? That's the question. And what are they accomplishing in this, I mean, you can take it a lot of different ways. Did you find it? It's page 11 under plan framework.
Second to last sentence.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's an accurate statement.
Well, so, and I asked Aaron Domine a couple times. Okay, so if you don't implement this plan, you only implement one piece of it, is the plan effective? And it was basically right to this sentence that he wrote.
Mhm.
And he said, yes. He said, you can implement one piece of this plan. And it's enforceable, and it's been enforceable in court, and that's the land use plan. Well, are we going to leave that sentence in there that says basically you need to implement the plan 1 through 7 for this plan to be effective? Because it says if you don't, it's naturally ineffective.
Limited in its effectiveness. So, I mean, if you have a future land use map, yes, it's effective. But if you implement every single goal and objective, it's like, that's much, much more effective. I think updating it does lend some credibility to it being effective.
Go ahead.
I'm just wondering if it's even necessary to say it all. I mean, does it even need to be?
Strike it.
Here's my thing. Somebody like me who's reading that's just, I wouldn't, okay? And then somebody who has a background, the people who are probably going to read this, who need to use it, they would understand that already. You know what I mean? Some of it, well, I like Aaron a lot. I feel like there's more explanation or fluff than there needs to be, where it can be more direct. I mean, keeping in mind that the average person has a 3rd grade reading level. So I feel like some of the things just need to be clear and to the point and take out all the,
Striking it is,
Strike it.
I'm good. I even put in there number 3 under there. I put 3. I said, can you say something like, "We'll follow community desires and goals to implement this plan"? Something along those lines. That seems to make more sense to me than what he put.
So strike, so the sentence says a plan without implementation, strike that. Okay.
I think that those next 2 sentences could be taken out and that could be the end of it.
Right.
The plan
how would that read?
is the implementation framework, out. A plan without blah, blah, blah is out. And then I think the last sentence is just informative. The matrix can be viewed in chapter 6.
Yeah.
So this is the implementation framework, strike it. The next sentence, strike it, and then full implementation matrix can be viewed in chapter 6.
Yep.
Yeah?
I'm fine with that.
Alright. So then DI 1, what is the strategy? Chapter 6, pages 132 and 33 are pathetic in description of strategy for implementation.
So if you guys have chapter 6 with you?
I do.
Okay.
I do not.
So it's an implementation section. It is boilerplate at best. I think that we should probably, my personal opinion is, we should ask for more than that. We should ask for, here is a very descriptive way of how this is gonna be implemented, what are the steps, what directors are gonna be involved. I think that it can go into a whole lot more explanation than what was written here. I view this as, this was boilerplate. This is probably in every comp plan that,
I don't doubt it.
yeah. So I'm asking is, if we're gonna have a strategy, if we're gonna implement this, we should have a strategy we all agree with, right?
But we do have the directors.
You wanna,
I
Every
have a quick
strategy
question.
and action has a,
Before we, and this could, my bad, because I've had a blur of 2 weeks. Was this given to us to review before we got here?
There was,
The one, the edited comments, because if we're gonna jump into stuff like that, I mean,
I was kinda heading to the same place, like,
I haven't looked at that yet.
I haven't got to chapter 6 yet. Like,
all it's doing is referring to us to chapter 6. So I went ahead and mentioned chapter 6 in that, because it says your strategy, it's fine. It
So
says,
maybe we can mark that and then review
Yeah.
that since
Yeah.
when we get to
Perfect.
chapter 6?
yeah, I've read it, but I have not done.
it's a good point, no, yep, we can
Okay.
leave on that
Because
one.
I was confused. Because I haven't done everything I'm supposed to this week, so.
okay, so we'll skip that one. DI2, this cannot be left to interpretation if this statement remains in the document. Better to remove this sentence if the implementation strategy would be left to city leadership and boards present at the time.
So we've struck it, so.
So 2
we're
is
done.
struck.
Yeah, so that's, and 3, you can forget about that one, because that,
Okay.
if we're gonna strike it, great. If we're gonna change it a little bit, that was gonna be a suggestion on how to change it.
Okay, and then 4 page numbers need to be updated.
Yep.
Where, so under 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, where it says see page. Gotcha.
Exactly.
All right, chapter 2.
Hey Scott, before we start on chapter 2, I just, feel like there's a lot here for chapter 2. I'm just wondering, I mean, we knocked one out. I just haven't had a chance to go through all of this.
Well, okay, and can I just say something housekeeping, and I apologize that I wasn't here last time.
No.
I was not able to drive that day. But from what I've gathered by going through the minutes of the last meeting and everything, is we're to give these in advance to Scott, and then, so Scott and the committee, are we just giving them to Scott, and then he brings them?
Well, I know this is an update.
Are we giving them to, that way,
But I don't-
I guess, I don't wanna speak out of turn because this is
Go ahead.
obviously your committee, and I don't, Scott, you can jump in here. I would imagine that we would want the changes to go to Scott, who would compile them and then send them back out to members of the committee and say, this is what we're going to be discussing on this date. Take some time to look over these comments, reference back to them in the comprehensive plan, and come ready to.
and I think that's exactly what I was asking Tim, because I was just trying to look at the most efficient way to
Is that
get
what?
through this, but still do it the right way. So I think with that in mind, then we need to set some deadlines for ourselves. So, I mean, if Scott is going to get comments and then summarize them and get them back out to us, when do you need the comments to be to you, Scott? So we have listen, if I don't get them this many days before, we can't talk about them at the meeting because they weren't reviewed.
Well, I know, to answer that, I know that I've put out a bunch of emails to, and we haven't got anything, other than from the committee, like trying to prompt that, and that's fine. I just like, I feel like I haven't had time to review the changes on two. I don't know, did I miss this?
This is two, so 1 and 2, I had given 1 and 2 last.
Yeah, I
we
have
had-
those,
Yeah,
but these are different.
they're just, all I did was I pulled some of the, more directive type of comments out and just left the guide comments in.
Okay, cause I
That's
would
all I
say,
did.
I didn't go through your last
Yeah,
group of them, because from what I understood, we weren't gonna go with, we're not doing a wholesale rewrite of this
That's right.
document. We're here just, so, and there was a lot, so I didn't look at that.
I just feel
I
like
thought
there's a
we
better, after just going, we had a page and a half, or not even that, for chapter 1. We did 45 minutes. This is, I mean, I feel like there's a better way to do this. Am I
I feel
wrong?
like if we are organized, that we should not be here more than an hour to go through whatever we have. That's my opinion, that we should have the information ahead of time. It's up on, on us to review it and make sure we're prepared to discuss it. And that way, we're respectful of everyone's time. But it's hard for me to digest and then, make recommendations right off the cuff with things.
Right,
'cause
what do you
this is
guys
not
think?
my-
2 days prior to the meeting, our development committee meeting, to have any comments in?
Is that enough time for you, Scott?
No?
Well, I mean, 2 days,
Scott's gotta,
cause we need time to look through it too.
That's what I meant.
Oh, to us, 2 days prior.
To us, the committee.
in the time it gets to him, for him to turn it back around, put it in context of this week. If you guys had been given these on Monday, I realize it was a holiday, but would you have had enough time to go back and then reference? Or would you, everybody's got a different way of digesting this stuff. I always believe, I would always use a weekend to do that kind of stuff. Now, that's watching football, and you probably didn't get the greatest work product out of me, but that's, I knew I had downtime. So if I pledged that I was gonna do it in 2 days, I would do it. I would wanna know what your turnaround time is. I mean, for you, Scott, is it simple, listing, no summarization? For you, here's the pages I got from Andy, here's the page I got from Todd Barstow, who decided to comment on section 3, and here's Tommy's comments. Enjoy, come ready to talk. Now, if you guys can digest that in 2 days,
Yeah.
2 days is okay
Yeah.
with me. And that doesn't give Scott
These aren't
any
all,
extra
these aren't
summarization.
all chapters.
No, I'm just saying, before we dive into 2, and we're here till 6 or 6:30, my thought is we just knocked out 1. You're gonna send us comments on 1. If you can include, go ahead and include these as proposed, and then for the next meeting, we can have gone through these and we either agree or disagree.
Yes, and that's exactly what we're saying, and that I'm just saying for structure of our meetings
Yeah.
in the future. And Tommy, that's completely up to you, but I know, like, typically I think, oh yeah, 2 days would be enough, but like, if you put it in the context of this week,
Well,
it
even
would
a
work.
week, let's just say a week before and I know this is kind of, well,
That we have to give them to Scott a week before the meeting?
yeah. And I think to the committee 2 days. If Scott has a week,
Once Scott Scotty, jump in here. Once you get them, all you gotta do is mail them, right? We're not asking Scott to summarize them. He's just
Combining them in,
He's being the central repository.
because what I'm getting, yeah, I think you're right, because I guess what I'm getting at.
it would
is-
help me to have a weekend,
Yeah,
like if
Is-
it were,
like come in here, okay, chapter 2, we're gonna, instead of going line by line, I can come in here and I can go, okay, I'm good with E through G, let's talk about H. And then we're done, and then you might have one, instead of going by these line by line by line,
oh, I have an idea. How
Yeah.
about we just say, all comments given to Scott by Friday, he'll send out to the committee.
Yep.
If it comes after Friday, it'll be the next one.
okay?
I mean,
Hmm.
basically, every Friday, Scott would, if there were comments, summarize them, and I know we're not meeting weekly, but that would be the day that, you know, watch for, if I got any, I'll send them out to you on Friday.
My thought would be, I think it would help quite a bit if we had a regularly scheduled for the next however many months or weeks or however we want to do it. We're meeting an off Monday, the first or the second Monday of every month, and try and, because then if we say we know the meeting is this day, this is how we do it, planning commission and BZA, let's work backwards. So if you want a week ahead of time, then I can get it out, like we're doing, for example, the second Monday, then with my council report, I can get everything out to you, and then based upon that, I would have to have comments in by the Wednesday before. So then I can make a calendar and say, here's how we're gonna do this for the next few months, and then it's just, because if we did it based upon meeting sporadically, then they'll throw the whole system off. So if we have specific dates, we can work backwards and then say deadlines here, because Andy put page numbers and things. So if there's something that says there's this sentence here, I may have to go through and look and say, oh, that's on page 8, paragraph 2, because then that will help everybody. That if you're watching football and say, yeah, that's good.
Oh, I definitely need
that I
That'd
would
be helpful.
want a little bit of time if there's something that I need to do. It wouldn't take long to compile it and put it together, but just in case I have to search for something.
And it's organized. I mean, I'm okay if we make a schedule of meetings real quick. I mean, if that's how we.
I'm good with that, I just can't do like the way it might have to be a Tuesday instead of a Monday with my firehouse schedule.
Oh, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, meeting
Well-
every off Monday sounds a little
Yeah.
not fun, but, I mean, maybe, I don't know.
Well, I would ask the committee this, do you have a goal in mind? And I ask it this way, for completion. So would, for instance, this is a Wednesday, or would the third Wednesday, generally at 4 o'clock work? And that would be a monthly meeting. In your guys' opinions, will that get us to the goal within the time frame that you guys thought would be done? And throw that open to the people that are making that determination.
Yeah, and my 2 cents on that, my hope is to be through 3 by the time Chris and CJ were getting some data back from Chris and CJ on the water and sewer, and by the time we were getting the impact fee stuff back, and that was inputted in, because I feel like we really need that stuff before we start chapter 4.
Well, in the impact fee, to what degree are you talking? Because I know that the street committee now is going to be meeting street committee meetings specifically to discuss impact fees, so we can
It was the data that we were paying
them to get.
Right.
Okay.
them for, where they were gonna input that data
It's the
into
traffic.
this,
Okay.
What's the traffic info?
the traffic info.
Okay, so not,
So we weren't paying OHM to do something we just paid for.
sure, but when you said impact fees, what, are you talking about the impact fees that we're working on
Just
separately?
just the information
The
from
data.
that study
I
that
see.
we need to have, absolutely, and I agree 100%. There are a few things before we get to 4. Matter of fact, I stopped
Yeah.
at 4, the land use map, because that's really important stuff to have to even make that discussion.
So I can tell you that that stuff is done. The street committee is indeed gonna be looking at the impact fees, because all that data is compiled, and they're in the process of actually drafting the legislation for the impact fees, and we thought it was important. It's a development tool, but it's also a streets tool. And we thought it was important to vet that at the street level first. That's why, you talk about that, but the study, if you look at when Alan holds up his impact fees, it's about this thick,
That's how
and
I-
about that much of it is the study. It's mostly the study. And I believe that's done.
We need to get that data to OHM.
Well, to us. To
You
OHM?
know,
What?
To OHM to get, so that we can see.
I guess, Yeah, I see what you're saying. I'm just asking, I guess, do we need to have our legislation, like, does the street committee need to be through that and have a recommendation to bring to the whole of council about our legislation prior to moving to that area? I'm trying to look at,
I don't think so.
cause that's
I don't think so.
like a 6-page resolution or something bonkers.
I don't think so, cause we're not memorializing in this our
Okay,
impact
so
fees.
we don't, okay.
Just the data.
I was just making sure,
Agreed.
okay,
Agreed.
but there
I agree
wasn't
with that.
anything that was that I needed to make
Yeah.
sure happened before we could move forward here. That's all, okay.
So, tying back in that original kind of concept from you all, if you want 3 done before Chris, and obviously a piece of that data is already done, that's the impact fee data study. And then, I don't know about Chris and TJ, but essentially, I think it's done,
We should have GIS
it's
map.
done as
We
well.
should have something that we
Yeah.
can-
And the soil part
The
too.
soils and the.
Yeah.
We just need to find out where that's at, because that has to get to OHM.
Well, I understand, the reason that I'm asking that is if we say that it's gonna be the 3rd Wednesday, that means the 3rd Wednesday would be the 3rd Wednesday in July, and that would be section 2. And then the 3rd Wednesday in August would be section 3, if we're doing it by month. Is that right? Oh, no, I'm sorry,
You're off by 1 month.
I'm off by 1 month.
It's okay.
July, the 3rd weekend in July would be section 3.
3.
And then August is when you would do section 4. Now, does this group feel comfortable with that? Is what I wanna know.
I would like to speed that up personally, cause I hope to have, I was hoping to be into 4 in June. That's not gonna happen, I get it. So maybe could we start section 4 in July?
So Scott has my comments from 3 and part of 4 already, up until the point where you just can't do anything more without having the other information. So I'm perfectly fine if you guys, and I think I agree with you guys 100%, if we can review them ahead of time, and then come in here and go through them and say, agree, don't agree, let's just talk about this one or whatever, I think we're gonna speed it up quite a bit.
So are we gonna do, say, 2 and 3 before the next meeting? And, and say that's, if we do 2 and 3
2 and 3 in June.
in June, and then 4 in July?
Or I guess I didn't realize I think, what if we came back and off council week, so not next week, but the week after, that if your comments on 3s are already done, I haven't done mine yet, but 2s are already done. We could come back here in 2 weeks, knock out 2 and 3, and then just be ready.
Well, and
2 and 3 is pretty easy.
absolutely, and what I think Scott's looking for is a schedule. Like, he
That's
needs
right.
us to have a schedule, so I would be happy saying, at this time, barring any crazy whatevers, that we could meet on the off-council Wednesday every 2 weeks, if that's what we have to do, unless we deem the meeting unnecessary, and then we don't have it.
Check with the man doing.
What do you think, Scott? Too much, too little?
No, if we have that schedule, typically though, I have,
It doesn't have to be Wednesday.
I was gonna say, can we inject not Wednesday?
okay, perfect,
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, I mean, I pretty
That's
much do any
fine.
other
As
day,
long as you guys
Wednesday
are
is very
flexible.
bad.
awesome.
I only said Wednesday because that's today.
One of those days will fall on my every 3rd day, so if like it hits on a Wednesday, do it on a Tuesday that specific week.
I'm just gonna put it out there that typically, I have an appointment that I do on a regular basis that happens on Thursdays whenever 5 weeks falls around. So, those are priority. Thursdays would be,
And I don't know, I think my general thing is Friday afternoons are not a productive time to
Can I
meet.
make us, let me make a suggestion. If at our Monday, our first Monday council meeting of the month, we can set up our schedule for 2 weeks down, like whether that's a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or whatever day it is. We just know in 2 weeks from that time, we're going to have a meeting for the development committee, and I agree that 2 and 3 could go together really easily. And then 4 in July would be really great to try to knock that one out. That one might actually take 2 meetings, quite frankly.
Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, 1 and 2 have taken 3.
Well, we gotta, when we get rolling and we understand,
yeah, I
we
feel,
know,
I feel like once we're
when we roll, we'll
organized,
get a little better.
and things have
Right.
been thrown off, so the whole world
Yeah.
is twisted, so.
Four is gonna take at least one meeting, if not two.
So can we do, maybe we can think through this, if
Let's
you
get our
guys,
calendars out.
could we schedule the next one, and then we can kind of think about this and go from there?
So
And
when-
then we'll talk about the purpose of next meeting, and then we'll be more prepared, so we don't have to.
Okay, so,
So I work tomorrow, Sunday.
Yeah, I wanna, if I could interject something real quick.
Yes.
So the impact fees, their methodology was based upon the draft future land use map. Cause that's what they had to use. That was their methodology based upon land uses, trips, etc. Depending upon how much that changes, that can change the numbers in the impact fee. So we're kind of a chicken and an egg situation. So we can have information for the impact fees, and it might, at street committee, it might become more clear, because I was talking to Alan about this today, but they said, here's everything we looked at. So if you're in rural residential, the impact fee is, $1,000 a house. And that's how they looked at things. So if we get to the future, if we base everything and look at our impact fees and data as a base land use on that, then the future land use map can change, so that we're kind of at a weird situation where they're commingled. That I think if we, because some of these are, correct this page number, darken this text, I think we can still march through and do those things. Because some it talks about, like, here's what rural residential is, not where it is, but what it is. I think we could still continue to move through that, and that we know that when it comes down to the future land use map, that's gonna be the one that we're gonna discuss most, and then we can tie in, here's our utility information, we can tie in, here's the impact fee information, and then have that discussion then. But in the interim, we can move through and make grammatical changes, or this sentence doesn't read right. We can keep marching through that, and then once we have all that done, we realize these are the 3 key points that we need to marry together, and then we have that discussion. And I don't think for some of these that it's going to change anything, that if we make this update, oh, well, now that changes everything. I think it's these 3 key points that we'll have to look at. So I think we can keep marching through, realizing and understanding that once we have that information available, we can tie it all together, and that will be kind of the last hurrah.
I think you're spot on, and I think we're saying the same thing, maybe a little different. Just say, like, right here on chapter, where it says chapter 2, A, B, and C. This is an example. That we get this a week ahead, you can say, okay, A, and then we don't need to discuss every point if we already agree on it. Now maybe you get down to E, we've said A, B, C, and D, we're good. Make the changes.
Mm-hmm.
E, we need to have a little discussion on. But what I'm saying, what I don't think is fluid or time productive, is to sit in here and go and have a discussion on each point individually,
I agree.
unless we need to have one.
I agree. My thought was just, I don't want to hold off moving to subsequent chapters just because we don't have some utility information or some impact fee information,
Okay.
or some of those things that we can keep marching through and have lists like this for all the subsequent chapters, knowing we're gonna have to circle back and then formally consider how the impact fees, future land use map, and utilities tie together, because that's gonna then dictate that future land use map. So we
Okay.
can get that, and we know that's at the end, but we can get the editorial changes done in the interim.
So-
I'm sorry, I was gonna say, I think that makes sense because, in my mind, when we first started this too, I don't think that it's something that we can just, go chapter by chapter and make the changes and be done, because I feel like there's gonna be something in chapter, I don't know, 5 or 6 that ties back to chapter 2,
Yeah.
which is where the chronological bullet points of changes from Scott will come in super handy. So if we continue to go through the chapters like that, and like you said, earmark those things that we're gonna have to go back on to make sure we don't see anything that is conflicting, we don't, any redundancy, and then, I mean, I think that's a So I would be happy for us to continue to have the meetings so we can move it forward that way. And then when the information's available and we're ready, we can say, you know what, this meeting's gonna take a little longer, we need to talk about this.
Mhm. And what we can do, because I know there's BZA meetings, Planning and Zoning Commission, council meetings, parks meetings, we'll get a schedule of when those are, just so we don't pick one of those days. Because I know Planning and Zoning and BZA, I don't know when parks are, I don't
Parks
know.
are
Usually
Tuesday.
Parks are,
Tuesday after,
Okay.
actually, they'll change in the summertime. They've been every 2 weeks, but they'll change to go down to once a month.
on Tuesday,
Yeah. on
because we
Tuesdays.
can't, BZA is the second Tuesday. I don't know if they're the third or
How about
first.
They follow right after council, so it's
The
like.
first Tuesday is park.
First and third Tuesdays are our parks. So I would probably target one of those days as a good day early. They go at 7.
Yeah,
So
so
we'll
Oh,
be
we
out
did,
here
yeah.
before.
four would be great on those, if it's okay with everybody else.
First or third Tuesday would be,
First, okay,
Third
so,
Tuesday.
the first Tuesday is which is, that's not enough time. I was looking at the
That's
second week of June.
that's my
What's the
boy's
8th or the
birthday.
10th look like for you guys? June 8th or 10th? It's a Monday or a Wednesday,
Not Wednesday.
not Wednesday. Or even the 11th. I work Tuesday. I work the 9th, so I can't do the 9th.
I could do the 11th.
We'll do Thursday,
What about you,
Mhm.
Andy? Yeah,
time?
4
I
o'clock?
like the-
Let's say we keep it 4 o'clock.
I like 4. 4's good.
And
Okay.
if I know in advance, I can make sure I'm rolling in at 2 minutes till.
And let's say that everything has to be
June 11th.
out to the committee. Are we saying to Scott by Friday the 5th? And then out to the committee on Monday the 8th?
How much time do you, I'll put the dates together, just tell me how much time you want to review this. So if something comes in, do you want a week? Just tell me how many days, I'll back it up and say, so the deadline's this, or this is when it goes out, and then I'll give myself a day or two, so then I'll work backwards that and say, deadline's here, you'll get it here, meeting here.
Can we
3
ask for
days.
3 days?
3
Can
days
we
is
go with
fine,
that?
like.
3 days review time?
Yeah. So if we had, you send it out to us on the 8th for the 11th would be perfect for me. Is that good for you guys?
And then I'll say.
2 days,
June-
1 day. 2 days is fine. 3 days is great.
Okay.
So June 8th. So if I have it June 7th, that gives me,
What's a Sunday?
That's
It's
a
a
Sunday.
Sunday, yeah.
yeah, but if you, because then on that Monday is June 8th. And arguably we have, I'll do June 6th as a Saturday, but still if you give me the comments, then if we just keep that time frame, if it comes on a weekend, I'll adjust. But if we just keep that standard time frame moving along, then if it's on a weekend or whatever, I can always adjust and kind of make that work. So June 6th. Because then I can get the agendas and all that stuff.
So our purpose would be, we'll leave, hopefully by then we could have scenic view on there
I'm hoping.
for the 11th.
Okay.
So
I'm hoping.
you wanna just leave it the same agenda except change, chapters 1 and 2 to 2 and 3?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that'll work.
And then maybe on the 11th, maybe Tim, could you have an update for us on where we are with the data from Chris and CJ, the soil samples and,
Well, I have no clue where the soil samples,
It just comes from Licking County.
Yeah, I can,
Yeah,
I'll,
if you
Yeah.
get, like, Licking County will have that.
yeah, it's, I'll
And it,
I'll talk to Chris and CJ and touch base and see where we are with that. I've been working with them, I believe both of them had sent the data over, so I'll check with OHM and say, where are we with compiling that? And then, I'll see, it's like, can you overlay a soil map, and, you know, soil map, future land use map, and see if we can merge those.
There's a couple different pieces to that, which will be very helpful and for the floodway, floodplain. We do have some of these, we have a map already we know of that is the protected water, the groundwater protection map that we've got. You've already got the tree, greenway, it's in the greenway, but it's the tree mass and waterway map is already in here.
Mhm.
So that kind of all works with those future use maps.
Then the impact, the traffic part wouldn't come till later, that's not needed for the future land use map, is it?
Yes,
With the,
yeah, because the future land use map was the basis on which their methodology for establishing the fees was created.
I think the reason I'm asking to have an update on this, on where all three of those things are next meeting, I think that's gonna determine when we have our next meeting
for the 4,
for the 4.
I think 4, we can still do the editorial changes.
Agreed.
Okay.
Let's just keep moving through, and like I was saying, just know at the end,
I see what you're saying.
utilities, impact fees, future land use map all have to come together, but we can still get the editorial changes out. That way we're not skipping a whole chapter just because of those, that we'll get through it, and then we'll have at the very end time to work on those items. Because then if the future land use map changes substantially,
then the
then
impact
we'll have to
fees-
redo some impact, they'll have to adjust the impact
That
fees.
makes me twitch, but, okay.
Agreed, I know, that's what I'm saying, there's several moving parts in other areas that are gonna impact the others. So I agree with what Scott's saying, if we can get through editorial, grammatical, those things and kinda keep that marching and then come back and address those, so we're making the best use of our time and we're not just stopping or whatever.
I'd say one of the reasons it makes me twitch is the amount of effort that's gone into producing those, to have it
Change?
suddenly require a change. I'm hoping that the changes to the land use stuff is not so drastic as to, am I wishing it on a star?
I've already,
I thought, I was hopeful, I guess I was a little bit more, I thought we were gonna get to a discussion about the future land use map tonight a little bit. I was kind of moving this, I was thinking we would move faster, but not a problem, I can wait. But the future land use map it needs some work.
Yeah, I knew that.
have you seen the proposed change map in Scott's office?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm.
I mean, too,
But I
I
don't-
marked one up, I can show you.
I think when you mark it up, it looks bloody, okay? But I don't know that it is so bloody. I don't know that blood, with our eyes, given what we all know about the city and how each of us would mark them up, I don't know that it's, I guess I would wanna wait and see if those changes are going to change how the impact fees were developed. And you heard Scott talk about, we would talk about rural residential. If in our jaundiced eyes or in our, we say stuff like, this road right here should absolutely not be rural residential. We all know that that's agricultural, and by God, it better go back to agricultural because of, this stretch of 15 homes might not significantly impact the impact fees. However, if big swaths of it end up changing, that's where the impact fees looked at. Okay, if you're gonna put 240 houses here, you increase how much your average car drives on Cleveland Road, and as a result, impact fees for Cleveland Road are X. As opposed to if no homes were ever gonna be on Cleveland Road, then impact fees for things. So that's, am I right with that? Is that?
Essentially, and I was talking to Alan about this, thinking like, well, if density or intensity were to be reduced on the future land use map, then it's like, well, if we did something that we considered, if the methodology was based on more dense or intense uses, then we're good. But he was saying, legally then, what's the challenge that it's like, you base your impact fees over here, this is what's reality, you're overcharging me. So is what that comes down to, because I was thinking, oh, if we over-engineer the intersection to handle more traffic, that's good, but he was like, but then there's the legal aspect that we could come down to, we're overcharging people with that.
And the legal aspect is the biggest surprise for me, and a move from a council person to an administrative. I always just figured we'll make the impact fees, and by God, that's what they are. Like charging the fee in to go into a pool or a fee to go into something else. No. There's much more legal wrangling that happens in a developer.
We're getting into an arena that has a lot of legal issues.
Lots of.
The impact fees arena is a full-time job for people.
Yeah.
And they litigate it all day long.
And if you look at it,
It just is what it
I mean,
is.
we spoke very briefly, the fact that Pickerington takes revenue streams from impact fees to 7 different places. We're just looking at impact fees to roads. They send it to parks, to cops, to playgrounds, I mean, it's like, whoa. So I'm sure it's incredibly, I believe that statement, 100% people.
Here's my question is I didn't realize all that either. I mean, I know we all wanna get the impact fees in, but, how hard would it be, should we wait to have that future land use map where we're done with it, and then give it back to them and have them update that? Because it doesn't seem to make much sense for them to work off of a document that's a draft, to base the impact fees, because that's what they did, right? It was our
Yeah,
draft.
that was basically, they had no
That's
other
all they
choice.
had.
That was.
So that's what I'm saying is how difficult, I mean, should we, and this is a council decision, this isn't a committee, but should we, I don't know, I'm spitballing.
It improves your odds for defending a claim that the impact fees are wrong. If we based our comprehensive plan on the information that you're talking about, the utilities and the soils and so forth and so on, then you're closer to right than wrong.
I think the fundamental question you're asking now is all the work that's been put into the impact fees, all the studies. Does it make sense to throw the brakes on that?
I don't know. I don't know the
Well,
answer to
and
that.
that's what I was, because we're sitting here going back and forth, but, so they've put all that work into it, but we're gonna have, street committee meetings and vet it and do all this. Are we just gonna have to go back and recreate it when things, my goal is to make sure that when we have something, it's as defendable as possible. And you know me, I'm not about redoing things 4 times. I would rather do it the right way the first time. But are there things in that, Scott, like what we're doing with this particular plan that we could move through and still address while other information feeds in?
And I have not delved into the study as much as Alan has. I will be at the street committee meeting on Monday, just so when there's the impact fee discussion, basically I can gather information and say, this is how this will work, and then I can relay it to the development committee to say, here's the direction we need to go. I just don't know enough about it aside from just chatting with Alan, I think it was yesterday. So,
Mr. Hicken, then maybe on Monday's street committee meeting, we need to have that discussion and invite Scott to participate in that meeting.
I'm planning.
Scott will be here. I don't know. Yes. the
Do
answer
we
is
need, we need to have the meeting so we can determine as a committee what direction we're gonna go.
yes. And keeping in mind that you're already riding an animal that is, that there's legislation being drafted for.
Right.
So.
Well, and we did not send that for drafting yet. We said we were gonna wait because, right? We didn't send that to Zetz's team yet.
We did. What Zet said he would work, quote unquote, work on it. If you remember, and then we're kinda a little outside the scope, but I think it's still development, so.
Yeah.
The Pickeringtons, who we were possibly going to use as a, I don't know, a template. Their legislation was, it was, I'm trying to think how many pages.
70 pages long.
Yeah, it was like a book.
Yeah.
It was a booklet.
So I think where we were with that was Brian was beginning the
Outline.
job of pulling that apart and saying, you know, what don't we need? Let me look at this. And for the most part, I think as you internally, as an administration, and I've seen the emails flying back and forth, it looks like there's large portions of that that is, we're not even close to that long.
So why don't we because it's already Wednesday, so on Monday at that meeting, we need to have that discussion. That way at council that evening.
We can have, but here's my, could you put in the legislation that you can work through all your impact fee stuff, but in the legislation, it adopts the final future land use map, because I mean, even if we make one change to the future land use map, they did that off of a draft. It just doesn't make sense to me, and I could be totally wrong, to approve something off of a draft. When we're going to make
I think it
changes.
has to be more specific than that. I don't think the legislation can say based on, I think it has.
It's adopted based on our final, no? I don't
I
know.
think what the legislation will say is that the land use, or I'm sorry, that the impact fees were developed using a variety of tools, and that was one of the tools.
But one of the tools was a draft that wasn't
Well,
adopted by council.
I understand what you're saying, I'm just telling you what it took to create the
Oh,
impact.
I do, I'm just
I don't want,
flushing this out, I think, because I don't understand it completely.
In talking to Alan, he says, and we talked today, he's like, how much of this is gonna change? And he were like, how accurate is this? And I was like, I think we're like 80% there. But you said, okay, like if you were to change half of it, their methodology is gone. Minor tweaks here and there is fine, it's just, what's the tipping point? He said if you change 15, 20% of that, it changes.
and, without having been involved part and parcel with that conversation, that's almost exactly what I said. I said, well, each of us can look and we can line out these items and we can say, okay, this, you know, when you're at the paper level and you're drawing lines through homes or areas, that's one thing, it looks bloody. But are you changing the trends?
No offense to anyone, if you look at that future land use map, everybody, I believe, did the best job that they could do. It's a guess. And there's a lot of things on there that just, like, for example, the farm preservation, they guessed at where those are. And some of them are right and some of them are wrong. And that's not a shot at anybody, they just didn't
It's
know.
just, right.
So when you take just that, there's places there that have water and sewer that I know in my head that are, why would you, I mean, I don't wanna get down a rabbit hole, but that future land use map, it was a guess. And until we dive into it, I don't know, I gotta think this through, I need to grasp it and chew on it.
I think that, I agree with Tom, I think when they looked at the future land use map, they did it as, this would be a great area up here, this would be a great area over here, this would be a great area here. I don't even know that they looked at compatibility between the areas, nor did they have any idea where the utilities were. For instance, if you've got a 12-inch water line running up, Hollow Road or something, and you want that to be conservation rural, you're gonna get 15 homes on it, but that seems to be an area where if you've got the infrastructure, you would wanna think about having more houses there. I'm not saying that's the right answer.
Right.
I'm just saying that they didn't have that information to
Well,
make that
and you know what,
determination.
quite honestly, as a council, that's kind of, we didn't fully understand a comp plan, and so we put community members who we fully trust, very educated, competent group of people who understand it less than we do, so it's going to, those, you know what I mean, those are things we didn't foresee, because we had not been through this process, so the things that they would recommend, but they don't understand. I think this is, not of being able to point a finger at anybody. I think it's just a combination of really going through it the first time. You're right, Tommy, it's a guess. And
I guess what I don't know is, I don't know if it makes sense because of where we are in the impact fee statement portion of the world to, I mean, I think what this committee is saying is, I think that map use is gonna change so drastically that it may change those calculations. And that is not optimal.
it's
But
not,
we
but
didn't
you know what
know-
else is not optimal is paying for legislation to get drafted all the way, everybody continuing to work through those, and then going back and,
Yeah, actually, what would even be less optimal would be to start to try to place the impact fees on people and have them take us to court and
right,
say,
I mean, I
your
know
new
it,
land use map says that this intersection is agricultural, not residential, and why are you charging me $1,000 a house? Because clearly this is an agricultural area, not a, so.
and I guess I would hate to see, any of the administration, Alan, with as much time as he's put into it, continue to put all of this work and invest this time for it to have to be redone. And also, I believe that, this isn't gonna fall under the realm of what we already pay Zets for. I think because of the magnitude of what has to be done, there's going to be an extra fee involved if he's,
I absolutely believe that to be the case.
so I want him to stop right now. This, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Until we get to Monday and decide how we need to move this forward. And like you said, this is a council decision, like we need to have this discussion and decide how we're going to move this whole animal forward. Because we have a committee working on this, a committee working on that. We have to just make sure that we keep tied together.
Right, and hindsight's 20/20, but, and
Absolutely.
again, not anyone's fault, but
No.
I wish when we were voting on impact fees, someone, whether it's the impact fee company, hey, we're going off of this draft, you need to finish, that's a game changer for me.
Cause
I
that was
didn't,
a lot of money spent.
I didn't know that.
Right,
We need the impact fees, no doubt, but if we'd known that, I don't know, no one's fault, just,
that we wouldn't have been at the point of drafting those yet until we got this hammered out and got all the other information.
exactly.
I don't think we're that far away from figuring out the future use map. I know, Scott, you wanna put it to the end. I think that if given this information, that if the impact fees are put on hold for 6 weeks or whatever, I think we can figure this out. This isn't that tough. And again, it's gonna be a slightly more educated guess. Not slightly, it's gonna be more educated.
No,
We're gonna have the
that's
information to
absolutely
really lay it out and say, this makes sense, this makes sense. And then, Tim, it's gonna be really, is this gonna change 15 to 20%?
I agree.
Hopefully. Is it gonna change 35%? Well, if it does that, then we need to understand the ramifications of that.
I would
Well,
agree.
and I don't think Scott was saying move it to the end where you were just saying if we don't have the information, we continue to move forward, but if we get it, we hammer it, we can deal with it.
That was my thought. I didn't want to get stuck like, oh, we don't have the information, so we just stick on 4. It's
So-
like, well, let's get editorial, but we know we have to do it.
Right.
That was my thought,
So we
not just
can-
put it
So
off.
we can continue to move, but if we get it, we can do it right away.
Hopefully we
And
can-
I think
we
that
can
might
push
also,
to get it.
we might want to encourage council on Monday night, if you have any suggestions of this,
You need to give them right
you need to
freaking
give
out.
them now.
Yes.
So there's a huge map that's been up there for 6-8 weeks now. I haven't looked at it lately. If basically speak or forever, speak now or forever hold your peace.
Well,
Because,
in fairness, we have a
We have,
number of
yeah.
new members, and,
yeah,
whose, whether or not they'll admit it, heads are spinning, seriously. So we need to, encourage them to say, listen, sit down and talk to Scott and ask him questions, like make an appointment so you can understand what we're talking about. You know what I mean? So when you go to vote on this, you understand what the final decisions have been.
I think if we can put up there also for everybody that, new and old members, if they have the utility maps, if they have everything up there with that, then I think they're gonna feel more comfortable making a suggestion, rather than maybe just saying, similar to what the steering committee did, was, hey, this feels like a good spot over here. There needs to be some rhyme and reason to it, to back it up. So if we can get those pieces of the puzzle as quickly as possible, I know I really don't wanna comment until I
I
can
may
see
change
it.
my comments I've already put up,
Very much good,
you know?
very much
Okay,
good.
And I think too that, that might be a thing where we might, that piece, I know we were waiting until the end to send everything to OHM, but that might be one piece that we have them go ahead and update once all the comments are in, so we can actually physically see the changes and get it to Mel and the street committee to get to the impact, I forget the name of that company, whoever did the impact fee.
Paul.
Paul,
Strand.
Strand.
Strand, yeah.
So maybe that piece, we do have them go ahead and update.
And I don't think that's a bad idea. I do wanna point out that, let's say we go to an area that there's no utilities, or utilities may be far away. The city's not gonna extend the line. The developer extends the line. So if they look and say, I like this piece of property, it's recommended for this. Okay, if you want water and sewer, you're responsible for extending the line. So I don't wanna say, here's the utilities now, base it all around this, cause that could change. I wanna make sure that, you know, we look at it and we have a general idea where they are, but those eventually will be expanded, maybe not within the city. And the other good thing is we have the agreement with the district in terms of who's serving what. We didn't have that before, so a lot of pieces are coming into place, so we can put that up, but I don't wanna rely, my recommendation would be not to rely too heavily on where utilities are now.
I get that. Okay.
I don't know, it'll be interesting to, I might float past council, I guess this is a good place to test the balloon anyway, is, do you move forward with the creation of the impact fees and reference the comprehensive plan, and then if you believe that the comprehensive plan changes so much, you've got the fee structure and the legislation in place, you change the document that you reference, at which point you change the fees.
That's
So-
what I was asking at the beginning.
Maybe it's kind of a different idea, but.
I'm confused. Run me through that again.
Meaning if you move, if we continue to move forward with the impact fees the way they are we creating the pathway to get impact fees? Yes, they may change, but because I think that work's already done.
Well, and that's what I was asking, like if, you know, if it changes 20%, does it wash away a great deal of the work that has to be re-accomplished? I mean,
That's what I'm gonna look into.
is it productive? And I think that, maybe tomorrow you can, break that to Alan and maybe he'll be a little softer by Monday.
I think that's certainly on my calendar for things to do tomorrow.
And then if he calls me, I'll call him back Saturday, if he's really mad. But that way, I just think that's the discussion I really feel like you should have with Alan, you and Scott should have with Alan, so we can have that discussion as a committee Monday and bring that information back to council and share it with, so then we can kind of collectively as a council decide, you know, which helps that 5 out of the 7 members are on the 2 committees, because then we can
I agree.
mostly be in the know, so we can then make a collective decision about the best way to move it forward.
And I pledge to do that.
And I personally, I think they did the groundwork. It was like, here's the intersections, how they're functioning, here's the roads, here's what needs to be done, based upon this, here's the fees. I'm wondering if it's just, oh, well, this changes, so we drop the trip levels over here, this moves us here. I just wonder if you just plug new numbers into the system and it spits something out the end. I don't think it wipes
I would also
away
say
the.
that if you're looking at true impact fees, or if you're looking at the places in the city, I don't know that the most affected areas are going to, it doesn't matter whether you call it industrial or agricultural. The Broad Street corridor is the Broad Street corridor. Everything you travel in the city either goes north or south from there as you move east to west or west to east. And the arteries are the arteries. So it is possible that is the case. But that'll be a good conversation, tomorrow.
Okay.
And we'll have it ready for Monday, we'll have it queued up for Monday. So I'm sure Scott and I'll have that conversation with Alan.
Maybe take him out for a beer afterwards.
You know, if he says what I just said, and said, no, they're all based on these trips off of Broad Street, it doesn't matter whether as you move up, you drive through, things your guys are gonna change or not.
Okay.
And then there would be no libations necessary for calming it down. It's probably somewhere in between the two.
The formulas will change, but it's just the areas, it's the density in the areas that change the formulas. Formulas are already figured out, obviously, they've figured out what roadway lengths they've got, and
Yes,
it'll be a mathematical evaluation if you change densities.
and if that happens, then it's just put a different density in, and
It changes your percentage of the share,
Yeah.
which means you're gonna then pay, instead of 1,000, you're gonna pay 750, or you're gonna pay 1,500.
And if all that model is built, and
Then
it's
you
just
just change your equations.
then I'm thinking it's not
I think that's how it'll work.
as arduous an undertaking, or as dangerous, or.
But still worthwhile getting right. I
Well,
mean,
certainly.
getting this as close to as good as we can get it is gonna be helpful for both of those things, both, especially in litigation.
Agreed. Okay, I've monopolized a bunch of time, I'm sorry, Chairman.
All right. Does anybody have anything else?
Good conversation.
Good conversation. Scotty?
No, sir.
Okay. Motion to adjourn?
I will second that.
Well,
Lee,
yes.
Walter,
Yes?
Carter,
Yes.